various organizations, the Pulitzer Arts Foundation, with a public projects team, EcoBlock, a nonprofit startup, and Urban Harvest STL, a network of urban farms across the city. And so the three operate in distinct realms of work that are linked by a common intent of making space for people. I now see this synthesis as an opportunity to draw connections between sustainable and socially engaged design, and to involve myself in these complementary processes. With that, I'll begin with the Pulitzer. In May, I hopped on board, partly through the Pixel process, a joint commission between artists Amanda Williams and Andres Hernandez. My primary involvement was as this kind of project management level of 4 independent community design build projects. Each reused salvage bricks from the recently demolished, structurally unsound 3721 Washington Boulevard building, a product of a previous iteration of Pixel. And Art House proposed a space for gathering and reflection. Meanwhile, Solidarity Economy and Citizen Carpentry implemented an herb garden and a fire pit to his corner. Altogether, the projects challenged my understanding of how architecture can and should be. It showed me how architecture can be small, tactical, and ephemeral. And it got me talking with people that were doing just that. As a second part, I also got involved with a collaboration with the Pulitzer between the Pulitzer, landscape designer Mike Kostanek, and the Enright Avenue Neighbors Association. The design is currently underway in its butterfly garden on a LRA-owned garden lease property, 4562 Enright, featured here. Enright is temporary. It's a current timeline of 5 years. It's low cost, it's small scale. The program is dictated by need, by the people who live there and who are affected by it the most. It rejects checkbox community engagement and embraces a slow process of dialogue and listening. Enright was also an opportunity to explore connections between project components. A planting technique involved upcycling burlap sacks for coffee beans. This is something that I learned from Brett, the lead farmer at Urban Harvest. That project was ultimately implemented for Enright as well. And now, I'm a senior in architecture, and I'm beginning the process of a very long process of becoming an architect. And quite frankly, Enright is the type of project that long-term I hope to involve myself in, both given its, I think, attention to a slow process of engagement and of figuring out what is needed before something is built. At the same time, embracing this kind of timeline of architecture. That architecture doesn't have to be an enclosure and it doesn't have to be there forever. Secondly, I worked with EcoBlock. EcoBlock looked to develop a form-based code for net positive energy mixed use, mixed income housing in St. Louis. And my short-term goals there were to develop a preliminary website for their development, for their idea, and to conduct precedent research on urban agriculture as a component of that development. The precedent research took me to Detroit and to Chicago, and the trip consisted of getting coffee and meals with individuals and organizations doing awesome work in each city. For example, I was able to talk with the East Side Community Network about top-down versus bottom-up development. Both happened in Detroit. The city does a lot of the former, and ECN does a lot of the latter. It was in these conversations I felt the most connection between these trips in EcoBlock and Pulitzer, even though they were taking place in different cities. It reinforced that this bottom-up process of listening makes for pretty good architecture. In Chicago, I was able to simultaneously explore sustainable and socially engaged design at work. At the plant demonstrates this kind of functional industrial symbiosis. Design as ecology, as the thing that converts the byproduct of one small business into the input of another. Meanwhile, latent design epitomizes architecture as this user-engaged, time-sensitive, temporary, tactical intervention. And so kind of beyond all of this, I quickly realized that I was only ever interacting with urban agriculture in my project as this applied strategy, as something abstract. At Urban Harvest, then I intended to try it, do it. And my work, which just continued up until about 2 weeks ago, consisted of watering plants, planting microgreens, and harvesting vegetables, and I loved it. None of the 3 organizations are explicitly architecture, which is weird because this summer also affirmed that that's what I want to do with the rest of my life. However, my summer was about making connections, about reframing architecture as this process of listening and of making space for people. Thank you.
everyone, I'm Molly, and this summer I spent time on 3 women-centered and feminist farms exploring the relationship between gender and agriculture, more specifically how social and biodiversity impact one another, and looking at an ecosystem from a really holistic perspective. So this began in Vermont on a small one-woman farm, an activist farm that really focuses on local food security with Sharon. And what was so cool about working one-on-one with someone was really practicing ethnographic skills and interview skills that would benefit me for the rest of the summer. My whole project, thinking about social and eco-environments, was both academic, using anthropological research, as well as like hands-on activism, actually understanding how to grow food. I ended up next at a location in Northern California called First Generation Farmers, and as you see from here, it is a woman-centered farm. It was actually started with the idea to give women struggling with histories of abuse or domestic violence a place to grow along with plants. That was definitely like a theme of co-empowerment between human and nature that carried out through my entire summer. Another really unique theme of this farm, besides for being woman-centered, is it is the first organic farm to successfully erase all prices from their produce, and they give out for whatever they have a take what you need, pay what you can kind of status on all of their vegetables. So we have an open farm stand all day where you can come take vegetables. The next pictures are some of my favorite, working with the animals on the farm. But to me, this also represents more of an educational aspect, using animals and environmental conditions to really engage kids in what it means to do environmental work or education, et cetera. This farm is located on a really interesting boundary of a rural and urban community, and we would take kids and other women's organizations or different organizations to come farm with us and teach them. And it was really exciting. I got to work on a lot of the curriculum as well, coming into more urban libraries and like bringing goats into a library and talking about the way both rural and urban ecosystems work. It was super cool and really exciting. So my average day looked about 7 hours of intensive organic fieldwork in the morning. We had 15 acres of organic land. And then in the afternoon, I was working with an all-female and all-woman staff of farmers. And I spent the hours in the afternoon interviewing them, learning their stories, how gender impacts their agricultural experience, and also if it has made them think about diversity in plants and the health of the environment as well as their community. This is what we liked to call the tractor. It was always driven by women, and there were no other women tractor drivers in the community. The next farm I went to was an amazing place in the Himalayas in village Ramgarh in Dehradun, India. It is Navdanya's biodiversity conservation farm run by Vandana Shiva, and Dr. Shiva is actually considered the world leader in ecofeminism, which is bridging ideas of environmental and gender awareness. And it was an amazing opportunity to work with her, but as well with a more formal team of interns. We were called the PechaKucha, which is intern. And everyone who attended was coming from an either social ecological perspective or agricultural perspective, each with our own projects, really willing to like sustain and benefit this community. Another really big aspect of agriculture and community and identity is food. And that definitely brought us all together as well, and really strengthened this idea of understanding just how much thinking about your food, agriculture, planting, but also eating impacts human connections and this holistic environment once again. I learned some really cool recipes, and that was a really good time. And another aspect of understanding how this holistic ecosystem works was thinking about what are we putting into our environments, both socially and environmentally. I learned a lot about natural plant growth and what you can use as organic ways to avoid pests, etc. This is stevia, which actually does unbelievable things for pests if you're trying to avoid them in your gardens. And that was really exciting to get skills from another culture and another environment and really understand how to apply them back home and bring ideas of holistic ecosystems. This again, it was an unbelievable environment where everyone was just ready to contribute with what they had. Here we're collecting taro leaves, and we were about to learn about specifically a meal that also benefits digestive issues and also benefits the ground by harvesting taro leaves at a specific time. One thing I've definitely been thinking about a lot is how lucky I was to be part of a community that was really conscious of both environmental and social issues and what that meant for us in a new place. It was my first time in India, and I am a native English speaker, and that was definitely a barrier at some points, and having people really critically thinking about what that means to be coming from the United States in this place, and think about the work I was doing. And I guess to end off, something I'm also thinking about and really excited about my project is the way it kind of served as a bridge between hands-on work, really using the earth to understand the way our communities work, as well as applying it currently to my research on gender and agriculture. So I'm excited to continue working on that bridge. Thank you.
Hi. So I'm Caitlin. So this summer I spent my summer in 2 different places. I started off in Los Angeles at the Urban Project Los Angeles with Athletes in Action. So this was my second summer there. I was an intern this year, and it's a social justice education and service opportunity for student athletes from around the country. So we come and just learn about social justice issues in the context of LA and learn about how we can take that knowledge back to our campuses and be an influence on campus. And I spent the second part of my summer in Minneapolis, where I'm from, working with an organization called The Link, which works with youth in Hennepin County. And so what I was doing there, I was a juvenile justice intern at the Evening Reporting Center. And so it's an alternative to juvenile detention for male youth. And so they come for 4 hours a day, 5 hours a week, and do programming with community-based mentors and the ERC staff, and just do a lot of learning that way. So this first picture is back from LA. I'll talk about LA first. And so the Urban Project has been running since 1997, and this is a tradition. This is the Nickerson Garden Sports Camp. So this happens every year. It's a day when all the kids come outside to play and get their face painted, play basketball, soccer, and it's one of the only days that happens, because for a lot of reasons they don't come outside most of the days. This is another tradition. This is Beach Day. We take all the kids from all the service sites, put them in vans, and bring them to the beach, which the kids love. For us, it's the most nerve-wracking thing ever, because we're trying to keep everyone's head above the water and within the cones. Everyone gets home in one piece, and after a couple days of recovery, we can all say we had the greatest day. So the Urban Project is really a family. We have a lot of fun, but we also talk about a lot of really difficult topics. And in doing that, you get to know 50 people really well, really fast. And so this picture I chose because it was taken right before Dion, who's in the front. It was taken before his baseball game, and right before this picture, his mom, to his left, introduced us all as his family, and only half the people in this picture are biologically related, but it felt appropriate for her to say that. And so this picture, so it's a faith-based organization, and we've been asked to pray over this community center by one of the community members, because he was saying that the city wanted to shut down the center and reopen it as a Boys and Girls Club, which sounded great, but he explained to us how it would really limit who can access the space and at what hours, and a lot of people would lose their gathering space. And so so now I'm onto the ERC in Minneapolis. So this is the first graduation that I was a part of. It's a 40-day program for the kids who come. And when they finish, they have a graduation ceremony. And this was the first, and you can see that I'm kind of standing off to the side. I wasn't totally integrated yet. I felt like kind of an outsider, but towards the end, you'll see how that changed. And a lot of it changed actually by basketball, which is funny, but I love basketball. It's one of my favorite things to do, and I had that in common with most of the kids there. And so we found very quickly that we could relate to one another by playing lightning or playing two-ball, and we really got to know each other that way. They taught me how to spin a ball on my finger, which is something I always wanted to learn how to do. And it was just really a cool way for me to establish a friendship and not just be this outsider. Another thing we did, so it's very much a routine at the ERC. So on Fridays, so Jamal, he was a member of the community, he would come in and he would teach everyone how to tie a tie at first, because they'd be applying for jobs and getting back into school, and so he thought that all the guys should learn how to tie a tie. And then we would spend time playing on bucket drums, which is another thing that I've always thought was so cool. So to get to learn how to do that this summer was awesome. And so on Saturdays, what we would do is we'd go into the community. So we wouldn't be at the ERC. We'd go to festivals, or we went roller skating one time, which was really funny because some of the kids had never skated before, so we had fun with that. This was taken at the Minnesota State Fair, which is one of the last things that we all did together. And that was really fun. It's called the Great Minnesota Get Together, and hundreds of thousands of people go out to the fair, so that was really fun. On Wednesdays, a couple, Geraldine and William, they would come in and they would have just very real discussions with the guys. William had spent some time in prison himself, and so he would just come and answer questions, and it was really a time to get very real and just kind of clear everything away. And we would start every session reading the champion's motto, which I can't recite in 20 seconds, but if you ask me later, I can do it. So here, these are some of the graduations. So William and Geraldine would put on their own graduations for all of the kids when they would graduate. So they would bring in a certificate. And so another thing that is an incentive to complete the program successfully is you get a pair of shoes of your choice when you finish, which is an amazing incentive. You'd be surprised. And so this is one of the last graduations that I was able to be a part of. This is for AJ, he was a kid who, you aren't supposed to pick favorites, but he was maybe my favorite just because he's a really tough kid, but he's really, really, I just got to know him really well, and we just had a lot of really good conversations. And so you can just see on his face that sometimes you wonder if you were getting through to him, but that smile just shows you that you did. And so this just stands for a lot of the things that I've chosen not to share today, because I did get to know a lot of people's stories on a very personal level, but those stories aren't really mine to share. So there are a lot of things besides the happy moments that I learned, but I can talk about some of those in a more abstract way later, but I've just chosen not to share them today. And I put this picture up here because a lot of the kids I met this summer are the kids that received the backpacks that we donate supplies to when there are backpack drives. And backpack drives are great, but we need to do more than that. And so that's why I'm just calling on everyone here today to speak up. It's great to give supplies and give a notebook and give a pack of pens, but also think about it when you're voting for representatives, when you're choosing where to donate your money. Who are those kids going, or who is that money going to? Because the kids need it to go to them. Thank you.
So I don't know how familiar you guys are with the Roman pantheon, but Janus is the god of time, and he was said to be able to look forward and backwards at the same time without ever having to turn his head. And so I think something that's been really important for me through my civic process is understanding what came before us in order to move on forward. And if you ask anyone in my cohort, I'm usually the person that's more academically focused and like really trying to dive into the theory. And so before I left for my summer trip, I was asked what I want to get out of it. And I said I wanted to think less and act more. And I think this wall really represents a good metaphor for that, of like finding the way to climb up it, but knowing that at some point you're going to have to find a way up there. This summer, I was working in Beijing at Zhicheng Public Interest Law Firm. It was founded in 1993 by a group of lawyers in Beijing who were really interested in providing free legal service to migrant workers, abandoned children, and elderly people. It's now since spread across the country with 30 different offices, and it holds special status within the UN as an advisor. So this was my office every day. I worked 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. with some wonderful lawyers. We actually were right in front of a hospital, and so we would have ambulances come in every day, which really livened up the place. But you can see that we're right on the street, and we were open to anyone. If a client came in, people were always there to help them. I was originally going to be working with migrant workers, looking at how a system of internal migration control disproportionately affected access to social services for migrant workers. China has the largest number of migrant workers with around 240 million, and their movement around the country every year represents the largest movement of living creatures. I actually then started working with children. My first day there, they said they don't actually do work on the project I wanted to do, which was interesting. And so instead, I was looking at child protection systems, and I got to play with a lot of children, which was really fun, and get to learn their stories. And this was a water park that was right near our office. My main research project looked at comparing 25 OECD countries and looking at how their child protection systems support children and what the organizations look right there. I eventually then wrote a report which was submitted to the local Chinese Communist Party because they're in the process of revamping their child protection laws and wanted to see how other countries do it. I presented my research to the UN when they had a conference in Beijing. And really focused on how legally we define what a child is and how important culture is in defining what a child is, what age of childhood is. And they then went back to the General Assembly to give recommendations. Most importantly from this summer, though, were the friends that I made. For the internship program, there's about 40 of us from all different countries. And we just had some amazing experiences. There was also WashU friends because WashU grads are everywhere, and amazing professors to eat amazing food with. And so now turning to a different topic, I think my main takeaway from this summer is how do I bridge practice and theory? Because something that I've learned through WashU is that we're a very theory-driven group of people, but sometimes the people who are making the theories and making the policies really don't know what's going on the ground and don't know the population that they're working with. And I saw that this summer. So the way that Mao actually overcame this is he closed all colleges for 5 years and said all students had to go down to the countrysides and work with the people that they were hoping to then serve later on in the government. And so I'm not really advocating for something like that, but I do think it's really important to understand who you're working for and who you're working with. I think what we actually need is a revolutionary society. Currently, our society is stagnating, and it's built on systems and policies which disproportionately affect certain groups of people. I'm not sure what a perfect society looks like, and I'm not advocating for building it today, but I really do think that we need to start having tough conversations around how to build a better one. So I think this picture really symbolizes for me that I feel much more comfortable walking on the path. I think everyone has a path to walk, but for me, it's really easy to think about that path, where it might lead, who might be on it. But now after this summer, I feel much more confident just taking that first step and walking down it. So as you can see, I did make the climb. I did get to the top of the wall. I almost fell, which was fun. But from this picture, I think it really does symbolize that you can make the climb, you can get to the top of the wall, but there's still more to climb, there's still more to go. And there's wonderful people that you're going to meet along the way. But the most important thing is that you need to climb. And so I'm going to leave you with this quote. I don't have in 20 seconds I can't read it, but the last sentence really speaks to me. Leap before you talk yourself out of it, before you convince yourself to set up a temporary camp that turns into a permanent delay on your journey into your own heart. I just want to thank all of the supporters and all of my cohort for the wonderful support that you've given me. I can't thank you guys enough. Thanks so much.
So, reproductive justice is an intersectional social justice framework that defines the human right to decide if, when, and how to have children, and to raise those children in a community and an environment that's safe, equitable, and free from oppression. For my project this summer, this is what I wanted to work towards by both advocating for people's right to choose when and how to have children, also by advocating for equitable communities in which community members have access to the services, both medical and otherwise, that they need. For me, this looked like working at the Feminist Women's Health Center in Atlanta, Georgia, an organization that truly encompasses full spectrum reproductive justice work, doing everything from political advocacy and activism, lobbying, education, to full spectrum healthcare work, contraceptive care, abortion services, STI screenings, and other preventative health care. So this summer, my project took on two different components within the organization, addressing two very different parts of this spectrum of reproductive justice work. In the first, I was a health advocate in the clinic, which means that I was able to do a lot of patient education, working with patients individually, advocating for them during their appointments, doing emotional support work, and validating and normalizing the experience that folks have with reproductive health, which can often be very stigmatized. The second part of my project was working with an incredible group of women within Feminist who make up the Lifting Latina Voices initiative. This is my supervisor. What a star. Their role within the community is mainly to increase knowledge of sexual and reproductive health, as well as to increase access to reproductive health care services and other services for primarily Latina women within the Atlanta area. Some of LLVI's main goals are to increase empowerment and agency in the folks that they work with, and to make sure that folks have the information and tools that they want and need to feel empowered to make decisions about their health and their lives that allow them to live in a way that's most fulfilling to them. So to that end, one of the main programs is working with a domestic violence shelter, the Cherokee Family Violence Center in Canton, Georgia, a city that's about 40 miles northwest of Atlanta, with Latina women to train those who want to be community health workers, or promotoras de salud. This model is so important because the whole idea is for information on a community level to come from within, to be coming from these women who are part of this community, who know their community and its needs intimately, and who know what their community wants to know. So these women get a very comprehensive training from the folks at Feminist who talk about everything from sexual and reproductive health to sexual violence to identity and intersectionality. Once the promotoras have finished the curriculum, they can go out officially into the communities with backing and resources from feminists to talk to folks about health promotion. So the whole idea is for them to feel empowered to do this work themselves, and for them to feel like they have the agency to create meaningful change within their communities. Using that framework, my main project for the summer was organizing a community health fair for the community in Canton, Georgia, where the Cherokee Family Violence Center was located. That's the rest of my team. Because of its location and the lack of public transportation in Georgia, which is a real problem in accessing resources that are so abundant in the Atlanta area, particularly bilingual resources, the residents of Canton don't have access that is more available within the city of Atlanta itself. So with input from the promotoras, I did a lot of background work. They told me which social services they thought they needed, access to healthcare information and health insurance. They told me what kind of healthcare services they wanted, like diabetes screenings, STI and HIV screenings, access to mental health services, even things like access to car seats. And when the day of the fair came, they did all of the education work, the staffing of the table, and they were really the public face of this health fair, which was honestly so incredible to see how that fulfilled my goal, but also to see how they felt so empowered that they could do this work and that they had the power to make change, create access for their community, and teach people and see them grow in that knowledge. So that was such an incredible and fulfilling experience to see and have. Thank you all.
So my initial goal when awarded the grant was to end structural inequity as we know it. Finally, world peace would be within reach with just $5,000 in 10 weeks. At least that's what I wanted to do going in. Until Lou showed us our handy-dandy budget sheet, and with each passing class, I realized summer was a lot closer than I thought, and structural inequity a much bigger topic than I could fish than I could fry. So I settled on a community-centered research approach that would expose the narratives of Black youth throughout St. Louis. I believe the project would engage previous work of mine and could potentially impact how we support youth in the region. I focused on education disparity across class and racial lines, more specifically how low-income African-American students perceive and interact with systems of higher education. So why Black youth? The benefits of college are clear. For literally being more likely to live a longer life to being less likely to be incarcerated, college seems like a pretty sweet deal. However, the groups in this country who are most economically disenfranchised are most likely to be in prison and live shorter lives or disproportionately locked out. So although my lens was higher education, it was prudent for me to understand exactly how people interacted with systems that didn't directly support them or provide opportunity. For example, one could understand why children weren't considering college, could not understand why children were not considering college without also understanding the state of public education in disenfranchised school districts. So I was specifically interested in how poverty impacted educational opportunity, but I was also interested in how did this divestment look like to the youth who were impacted by it? How did children and parents view broken systems, and what information were available to youth so that they could adequately take the information that they had to be successful? So all of the questions to my and all of those questions inform my overarching question, which was, where's the conversation on higher education currently situated at, and why are we not having more conversations? I was able to answer my questions through a series of interviews with youth, parents, and others in the community. So I traveled around St. Louis to well-known, low-income, predominantly Black neighborhoods. My goal was to meet families and, most importantly, meet students where they were at in an attempt to capture the most authentic stories I could. I traveled to Martin Luther King Street, East St. Louis, North St. Louis, and the Hyde Park area, and people were more than willing to share their stories. So I interviewed people who had legitimate concerns about their children's education, but were often impacted negatively by the effects of underfunded schools. For example, Corey, who tried to meet with his daughter's teacher over 4 times, and each time was sent away without a meeting. He also lamented about how he was hesitant to enroll his kids in St. Louis Public School District because teachers had a hard time keeping track and attending to all of their students in over-enrolled classes. I interviewed grandparents, Katrina and Evelyn, who wanted more places for their kids to play over the summer, but settled to watch their kids play in the front yard most mornings because they didn't have access to transportation or the facilities that were operated across town. Simple summer enrichment was a goal of theirs, but was more difficult often than not. I met students Chris, Blake, Sean, Anthony, and Olivia who wanted to go to college but didn't exactly know what it took to get in. When asked what it took, they all simultaneously shouted, hard work, which is definitely true, but the specifics of how to access higher education were often left out of the conversation. I met with youth who wanted there to be less violence in their communities. If you see that sign, those have been distributed throughout low-income, predominantly Black neighborhoods throughout St. Louis. And the youth are 100% aware of the issues that are going on in the community. So my goal was to understand exactly how they view signs like that. There were students who also were wanting to be engineers and doctors, but a part of this project was about me understanding how they struggled with those resources. So as I began editing my videos and pictures, I realized that subconsciously I was searching for narratives that would combat negative stereotypes about Black people and their desire for change. But of course, I didn't really have to search far because there was not one person I interviewed who did not want more from the local government and our educational systems. Furthermore, I made sure I told a story of resilience, power, and capability so people knew we are not complacent. And it turns out I approached my work in the right way because according to the United Negro College Fund, we should act swiftly to change the narrative in Black education. Our conversation about the Black community is centered on deficits and ends on deficits. Their 2016 report revealed that Black parents and caregivers are tired of the negative tone in education. So it's necessary to change how we are viewing youth's ability and capabilities within the sphere. So moving forward, I would like to continue to capture the voices of people in my community. This summer, I was accepted into Continuity, which is a 12-week program focused on expanding diversity in media production, and I partnered with United Negro College Fund. I'll be using the footage from this summer and the skills I learned in Continuity to start an advocacy program to bring positive stories from our communities to people who can enact change. In this story, the truth is personal stories open a personal connection between different people. The audience can respond with empathy because storytellers openly share their emotions. When these stories concern issues of injustice, exclusion, democracy, and human rights, different insights are generated. Democracy and social justice are nothing if not collective endeavors. So how are connections made between personal stories and the shared narratives of social action? Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Mohammed Isaac Hossein. The misspelled badge on the right is a great representation of the first foray into the bureaucracy of local government. I was studying drug recycling, prescription drug recycling, and compiling a feasibility study to submit to the St. Louis County Department of Public Health. This all started in my beloved hometown of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Tulsa is home to one of the nation's largest drug recycling facilities in the country. They have about $21 million of prescriptions, about 200 prescriptions themselves that have been dispensed since 2004. We really hope to use this model from Tulsa and bring it to St. Louis. What is drug recycling? So we want to take unused, unopened prescription drugs, just like the ones in this bubble pack, and we want to be able to redispense and repackage them to give them to the community at low cost to those who couldn't otherwise afford them. A lot of these drugs come from nursing homes due to high patient turnover rate. 21 states currently operate some kind of drug recycling program. A lot more states have legislation that allows for an operation like this, but doesn't have a program itself. Missouri is one of those states. Missouri actually has really great legislation and a really robust set of laws. So when it comes to that, there's a lot of states that we're in contact with to see what we can bring to St. Louis. This is the main atrium of the St. Louis County Department of Public Health. My day-to-day work looked like interviewing other states to see their best practices and how we can bring those and apply those to the St. Louis area. We want to look at legislation and compare our legislation to other states to see where our holes are. And we're also looking at estimating cost for a pilot program and even a full-fledged program. Here's my cubicle. I had my own email, had my own phone number. I kind of realized that cubicle life wasn't really for me though. I really valued people-to-people interactions. I loved interviewing people. I loved meetings. I know, right? Meetings. The desk work wasn't really for me. I didn't really feel that. So whenever we had meetings like this, there's pseudo meetings. This is when we were listening to Governor Greeton's announcement that there was going to be a state-run prescription drug monitoring program to fight the opioid crisis. This is a really great example of the role that public health plays in each of our lives, but no public health official would ever call themselves a healer like someone in the medical professional would. These were hanging up in my cubicle, and they kind of reminded me about the role that public health plays in terms of large-scale interventions, in terms of communal health, and it really helped guide me in what I wanted to do in my future. So I really hope to go to med school one day, and I was actually studying for the MCAT at the same time. Juxtaposing the pathway into medicine, these are my MCAT study materials, juxtaposing the pathway to medicine at the same time as working in the public health industry really helped frame how I wanted to be able to move forward as a physician, and bringing in the idea of communal health into my everyday practice, but also encouraging that in the broader community and how those two can communicate with each other. Another balance that I had to work through was this idea of the St. Louis County and St. Louis City. I was working with the county health department, and it's interesting to note that the county health department has a lot more flexibility to take on projects like this than the city health department does. Additionally, a lot of our target audience in drug recycling would actually live in the city, but it was the county health department doing the work. This is an example of the creative process at the beginning of the summer. This was laying the groundwork for what the feasibility study would look like. This is actually still being written. This is actually still being compiled, because to this day, we're still gaining new community partners and gaining new methods in how we want to go about doing things. Another example is this. This is at the end of the summer. We have a deeper dive into the cost of what it would have. We determined 3 components: donation, transportation, and dispensation. This was actually we were able to submit a budget summary to the St. Louis County Department of Public Health, and we'll see where that goes. We also worked with the St. Louis College of Pharmacy. Students there are required to have a certain level of clinical experience in order to graduate. We really hope to leverage that time in order to staff the pharmacies that we hope to dispense drug recycling out of. A lot of these students really want that community experience, and we hope that this is one method we can help provide that to them. This is Quorum, a pharmacy operated by Delmar Gardens. Delmar Gardens is a nursing home here in St. Louis. They have agreed to help us explore the concept of drug recycling. Quorum has actually identified a number of prescription drugs that they already discard and destroy that they would love to see used for something better. There's a lot of stakeholders at play. There's a lot of ways that these things fit together in a really intricate puzzle. It really reminds me of St. Louis neighborhoods in the way that every single neighborhood has a really great place and a really great story. But in order to make the grand picture of things, we have to be able to see how each piece fits together. And that's what I really hope to see with drug recycling. Thank you.
Good evening. Hi, I'm Stephanie Whedon-Smith, Assistant Director for Campus and Community Partnerships, and I have the great pleasure of being co-instructor for the Civic Scholars. I'm so excited to be with you here today. So I also have the great pleasure of, again, offering just gratitude to our Gephardt staff, our the alumni development, and parents that have come far to come see, and nearby here in St. Louis. We thank you for that, for sharing this moment with us and with our Civic Scholars. I want to make some special thanks to our donors, Joe Marcus and Margie Olson. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us this evening. So, with no other further ado, our next scholars.
Hi, my name is Asiatu Jallo. I spent this summer in New Orleans with Propeller. Propeller, Force for Social Innovation, to be correct. And it was based out of New Orleans. I never want to go back there again, but I have to at some point. So this was Studio B. It was an art gallery that I didn't even get the opportunity to go into, but when I passed it, I saw this mural and thought it was like beautiful. And so the poem says, she was wild and she was very beautiful, and sometimes she, a tree strong and rooted, that piece of shelter that never asked for anything in return. I thought it was such a beautiful description of this city because it's such a place of creativity, of rebirth, of social change. And I don't think my organization could have existed anywhere better. It's a really interesting place to be in because of Katrina, I think, and how people rebuild after like everything is wiped away. And so why I don't like it is because it was hot and humid, and this was like an overcast day, and I walked to work, and I lost weight. Like I lost weight from walking to work every day, but I preferred this like sun that just like burns. But you know, whatever. Propeller was there. Propeller is the organization that I work for. It is a social venture accelerator working specifically with ventures, new businesses, new nonprofits, and new initiatives of current nonprofits in water, education, healthy food access, and healthcare. And while I was there, I just really got to participate in different events that they do. This is Pitch NOLA. They actually just had their education-based one yesterday, and I had to miss it because I was here. Can't go to anything else. But getting to see the work that they do and the space that they're providing for people to understand how they impact the community was really important. But I also got to just work with phenomenal people. So this is Daniel, Eric, and our executive director, Andrea, at our culminating event for the accelerator. It was an interesting time to be there because all of these people so deeply care about racial equity, which is a really interesting place to be because it's something that they all put into all of their work. And so I was a development intern there, and a lot of my summer was spent collecting the stories of the people who had gone through the program. I wasn't there for this one, it happened before I came, but I was collecting interviews, going out into the community, hearing people's stories, but also honoring them. And since racial equity is such a big thing at the institution, I was like, what do you mean by that? Because we could be talking about two completely different ideas. And I was like, if you're building your entire organization based on racial equity, what do you mean? And so I got the opportunity to understand their definition by going through the Racial Equity Institute groundwater training. This is the best picture I could find. And it was such a different look at racism that I had never had before because it looked at structural racism. And I see it a lot as microaggressions, crazy people talking to me crazy on the street. But what they really called it was like racism called by any other name is still racism. And by that, I mean, we're talking about an education gap, but that's racism. We're talking about health outcomes, but that's racism. We're talking about higher incarceration rates, but that's racism. And it's all racism, like all of it is racism. And they asked the question, which is something I'm really still wrestling with, is like, is our work rendered ineffective because we aren't calling it what it is? And so we're all tackling these things that are passion projects, but we're all calling it different things. We aren't seeing it as the same thing, and so we aren't even being effective working together in our separate things because we don't see it as the same issue. And so what I think this summer called me to do was like, what do I consider? Because at Propeller, they consider racial equity in all the work that they do. And so like, what do I consider as I walk through this world? Am I considering others? Like, am I considering racism as like a founding, like a part of our founding documents, which is something I've been discussing. But like, what do we consider as we move through this world? And now I'm left with like, now what? Like, now what do I do? Like, now understanding this is something that's important to me, and like now understanding what I need to consider, what do I do? I don't know. I don't know what that means, but I do think it pointed out some things that are really important to me. But what I do know is that I never want to own a pet. Like, never. I lived with a golden retriever, but we fostered kittens. We didn't even foster kittens, but we had kittens, and we had Iris, who just like flopped on me. I don't like dogs, but flopped on me every single time she was in the house and just started kicking. So I don't want animals, and that's what I know.
So my project didn't actually start this summer. It started in December of 2015 when I first came across this chart. This is the 960 people who were killed by police in 2015, and anyone highlighted in orange is someone who is suffering from a mental illness. They account for 25% of all people killed by police each year. This chart really set me back in my tracks when I first saw it, and when I dove more into the individual stories, one I came across in St. Louis was that of Kajimi Powell, who suffered a mental breakdown, armed only with a pocket knife, and was shot and killed within 19 seconds of the police arrival. This is not, we've been talking a lot about police brutality. This is a lack of training. This is a lack of police understanding how to deal with mental health illness. So what I want to do with my project was to address crisis intervention training for all police nationwide, but zoning in with $5,000 in 10 weeks, I was going to focus on St. Louis, getting the St. Louis PD crisis intervention trained so that this situation with Jimmy Powell could not happen again, that de-escalation techniques would be used. And the method I wanted to go to do this was through documentary. I've self-styled myself as a journalist, and telling stories is kind of where I feel most comfortable. So I wanted to branch out a little bit and go into video rather than writing, and interview people who have been affected by mental health illness, people working in this field, interviewing police officers to find out why CIT has not been widely adopted in the city and what can be done to have it be widely adopted. One of those people is DeWitt Campbell. He used to work for Behavioral Health Response. It is a crisis center in County of St. Louis, and he was a mobile crisis outreach member, meaning he was part of the team that would go out to crisis situations and talk to people should BHR be called and should that person not want to continue talking over the phone line. But talking to DeWitt made me reframe how I wanted to approach this project. I was like, why am I focusing on police if police aren't the people who are trained to do this? I should be focusing on crisis counselors and pushing the advocacy more towards them because they have been through this training. They're not getting a de-escalation training. They're going to mental health professionals who really know how to do this. So I wanted to work more closely with BHR and the mobile crisis team, highlighting and spotlighting the work that they do to have that be increased and more widespread and acknowledged across St. Louis. This is Bart Andrews. He's the head of BHR in St. Louis. And my sit-down interview with him was important because he validated a lot of that switch that I was thinking about. But he also said something that struck me and was, if you want to help mental health crisis, we need single-payer health care. At the time, I was like, that's just a very strange thing to say, so I didn't think much of it. But as I continued working, I started to work with Provident Life Crisis. That was my primary partner for this summer because they're much smaller than BHR. They don't have nearly as many resources as this big office building in West County does. This is Kevin Shackelford, the director of Life Crisis. They have a 5-person crisis hotline room, and they're servicing a good portion of the Midwest, all of Missouri. They're a backup national hotline. So if overflows from any of the 10 national centers, some of them will come to Life Crisis in their 5-person room. So I was like, this is a place where I can have an impact. This is a place where this documentary can actually do something, like increasing the awareness of this service, increasing the awareness of what it needs and where it can go. And that's what I want to focus on. And then I met Elizabeth. Elizabeth was a former police officer, to bring this back full circle, and she worked at Life Crisis doing outreach again. She was the one going to police departments and teaching them about the techniques, de-escalation techniques, CIT, that kind of stuff. And she told me something very similar to what Bart said, which is the best way to assist crisis services is to not have to use crisis services. So this is a picture of the inside of Life Crisis's hotline room. It's 5-person. They just opened a new one. They're expanding to, I believe, 9 people now. And this is another quote that I wanted to point out. I know you're sad, so I won't tell you to have a good day. Instead, I'll tell you have a day. And this is all just to show that over the course of my summer, what started as like police brutality and not understanding mental illness really shifted into preventative care. And that I used my 10 weeks to honestly educate myself about how to best address mental illness in our society. So I'm going to use the last few minutes of this. Single-payer healthcare is how mental health crisis is going to be best addressed in this country because you need preventative care to not reach those crisis situations. And if you normalize people having those mental health checkups on a yearly basis, on a monthly basis, without it having to hit a point where like you are grasping for something that like no one wants to normalize or acknowledge that you have, then our society doesn't have to depend on these crisis resources that frankly are not equipped. No one wants to go into crisis services because it's not a glamorous job and you burn out after 3 years. That's the turnover rate. So bringing it back to WashU, 44%, nearly half, have symptoms of depression. 75% of college students have never sought help for their mental health problems. So even just in our community, we need more preventative. We need more people being able to reach out and say, are you okay? Like having that checkup be normalized so that these crisis situations aren't as exacerbated. Thank you.
So I'm going to start with a question. I want us all to think back to the last time we were on an airplane. What was the name of your pilot? My name is Anna, and this summer I spent 7 weeks in Madurai, India, developing patient education materials for Aravind Eye Hospitals. Aravind is the world's largest eye care provider. They were founded with the mission of establishing needless blindness, which means any sort of blindness that can be treated. In India, the vast majority of cases actually qualify as needless blindness, but a lot of patients can't afford to receive treatment, and so Aravind provides over 60% of their surgeries for free. In order to have their patients experience the best recovery possible, they've also developed a whole range of patient education materials. So here we see some of the hospital posters, but they also have brochures and videos in both English and Tamil, which is the local language. But a lot of doctors were finding that patients weren't using these consistently, and so my project was to explore another patient education avenue, and that was the Aravind website. And specifically, I was asked to develop informational content on about 30 eye diseases and treatments, and I was also asked to redesign the website layout to provide a more user-friendly experience. So on the left, we have images of what the website originally looked like, and on the right, we have a picture that I proposed as part of my final product. And well before I arrived at this final product, I had to start out with a needs assessment. I wanted to know who my target audience was and what they wanted to see in the final product. And because the website was only available in English, I wanted to interview as many English-speaking patients as possible. The only problem was in the entire hospital, which is like 3 hospital buildings, there were about 12 English-speaking patients, of which only 5 had internet access. So this raised an interesting problem, because who was my project actually impacting? In India, English speakers and internet users make up a very affluent and well-connected section of the population, and so I really wanted to expand the reach of my project. I just wasn't sure how to go about doing that as an inexperienced American intern. So I actually got some clarity when I left Aravind and went to this elementary school in a rural village called Sekipati. I was there for a cataract screening outreach camp with an Aravind doctor, and her name was Dr. Meghna Tanwar. Dr. Tanwar was originally from India, but she was from the north, and so she also experienced a similar transition into a culture that she didn't really identify with. So this is Dr. Tanwar in the orange, and I spent the entire day with her, and at the end I asked her why she chose to leave everything she'd known in Delhi and come to Madurai, where the language, the culture, everything about medicine was very different. And she said it was because of Aravind's system of values. But instead of defining what that was, she asked me a question. She said, Anna, when you traveled from Chicago to Madurai, what was the name of your pilot? I took 4 flights to get from Chicago to Madurai, and I could not tell you the name of a single pilot. And that was Dr. Tanwar's point. The idea is that when we fly, we put our lives in the hands of pilots without questioning their names or their credentials. We view them as part of a team of flight attendants and ground crew that is responsible for getting us from point A to point B. And Dr. Tanwar said that at Aravind, medicine is treated the same way, but instead of pilots and flight attendants, now we have doctors and nurses. Everybody in that equation plays a very critical role, but Aravind really emphasizes understanding how that role fits into the larger picture. So there's an emphasis on the collective instead of the personal. That was actually a very inspiring thing for me to hear, not only in terms of medicine, but in terms of my own civic pathway. I realized that if I wanted to figure out how to modify my project, I need to figure out my role at Aravind. And what that meant for me was understanding their values so that I could fit my value system within that. So the way I went about that was by familiarizing myself with the people and, by extension, the community. On the left-hand side, we have Vasco, who is one of the many doctors I had the opportunity to meet in the hostel that I was staying at. He's from Mozambique. And then the picture of the 2 girls dancing, those are actually my co-workers' daughters teaching me Bharatanatyam, which is one of the classical dance styles there. In the end, what that meant was I had a new sense of comfort with the community, which translated into confidence. And so I was able to not only complete the deliverable tasks that I was assigned, but I actually felt much more comfortable presenting an argument as to why my project should be modified. So it wasn't just in English, but it actually was a website in Tamil as well, which made sense to me because the vast majority of patients there spoke Tamil. This is a picture of me and my supervisor on my last day in Aravind. And I just think this picture is one of many, many I wish I could have taken because I just formed so many valuable connections with people there. And so even though I'm thousands of miles away and months removed from my project, those are the connections that I'm going to carry forward with me. I took this picture on one of my flights back home. And I realized this in retrospect that there was this really beautiful metaphor we used in class about our civic pathways and how we start out in the clouds with our ideas before falling to the ground. And I feel like when I was at Arvin, I was able to go through that whole process. And now as I look forward towards my career in medicine, I'm back up in the clouds. But as you see, there's this beautiful light. And I think that's just such a beautiful image for what my civic pathway has been and what it will continue to be.
Hi, I'm Karthik, and this summer I worked on 4 projects in my hometown of Reno, Nevada. Living there, I've learned quite a bit about how our community faces difficulties in both producing and accessing fresh, healthy food. I probably should have put a picture of our Walmart distribution center instead, which epitomizes the kind of food that we have access to. The first part of my project took place at a WIC clinic for women, infants, and children, where I worked to increase the effectiveness of our farmers market nutrition program. At first, I was creating some posters and reminder postcards, a text message system to stay in touch with clients, as well as procuring reusable bags for families to use at the farmers market. Later, I went and created a video of myself shopping at the market and conversing with the vendors in English and Spanish so that the families could see how easy it is to shop at the market. I think this was really helpful for our Spanish-speaking clients since a lot of them tended to be less likely to visit the market than their English-speaking counterparts. The second part of my project took place at the Northern Nevada Center for Independent Living, where it's a disability resource center for young adults. And there I would chat with the clients at the recreation nights and help run the cooking class. But most of all, I'm so glad that I got to learn from this wonderful, experienced team and get to know clients by name and story. One of the stories I heard most often was how the disability was merely one of many challenges facing a client. A lot of them came from broken homes, struggled with nicotine addiction, or lived in poverty. And I think many of them didn't have access to a kitchen like this outside the center. So you can imagine why at first I thought the center wasn't doing much to improve clients' nutrition, but I decided to withhold judgment for a while, and talking with the clients, I learned that a lot of them only drank soda once a week. The staff, meanwhile, needed the money from this machine to provide services to clients. So I think my immersion with the clients and staff helped me collaborate with them to propose some solutions. With the life skills coordinator, we started doing healthier dishes like this beautiful salad here. And we would also do yoga or Zumba before every cooking class. And we started making preparations for a weight loss challenge. My work with WIC also reminded me of the importance of immersing myself in a community. Manning the WIC booth to welcome clients to the farmers market, I was able to meet these tough, resourceful moms and dads who showed up to improve their children's health. They weren't waiting for a red carpet. I just had to direct my efforts as they requested it. I saw how these requests varied pretty widely in the clinic. Teaching the WIC Farmers Market class, I would always end by asking them, what can WIC do for you? And some of the moms would ask for more recipes on how to cook a certain vegetable. Others would ask for extra large vouchers for their extra large family. And the WIC staff and I sought to fulfill the requests whenever possible, and also to expand some of these solutions like monthly recipe sheets to all of the clients. Yet we also wanted to focus on research, which was crucial to make sure our interventions were having the desired effect. We targeted the families who didn't use their vouchers since they probably weren't having their needs met. Then I also did similar work through the Community Health Alliance, a nonprofit which runs WIC medical, dental clinics, and a food pantry under one roof. They created this kitchen just to do food demonstrations for their clients. And their approach to individual patient needs carries through to health fairs as well. Unlike a typical health fair, the patients are assigned to specific stations like plant pickup, dental cleaning, or farmers market vouchers, depending on their individual needs. And this model of mixing medicine and public health, I think, is extremely powerful. Yet a behemoth like CHA is not without bureaucracy. So I turned to farmers, where my ideas came a little more to fruition. And here, here I was able to work with a food bank to create a channel to distribute leftover produce in good condition to economically challenged veterans. Now, throughout the summer, I found that myself questioning whether fruits and vegetables are really the best answer, because behavioral change is hard. And this inspiring fellow youth, he reminded me that sugar in soft drinks is also a major obstacle to health. Yet whether we're talking about sugar or fruits and vegetables, behavior change is difficult. So you can see Mexico instead, they decided to focus on policy and tax sugar. The taxes architect explained to me that he wants to see a cultural shift in diet along with the public health policy change. So maybe WIC does have a value in improving nutrition. And as a public health focused physician, I hope to keep my finger in all these pies. Thank you.
Hi everyone. So my project this summer focused mostly on the social determinants of health, which are all of these things that you see on this infographic and how that affects different groups in our society disproportionately. And I wanted to know explore how communities can be places for healing inside and outside of the medical establishment. So the first part of my project was in Washington, D.C. at a yoga studio focused on making trauma-informed, accessible yoga classes with this incredible group of women who were all focused on improving the health of their own communities through this tool that they can use. And I learned about a lot of things, but one of the things that I think was really important was thinking about the human mind and the human body from a completely different perspective than what we learn in textbooks, and giving more agency to people to experience their bodies and their health in different ways than we normally talk about. The second part of my project, I went to St. Louis to work at Places for People, which is a mental health and social service agency focused on helping people who have serious mental illness through social services and community psychiatry. And I was working on a research study that looks at the impacts of social health and emotional wellness on people who have severe mental illness, because they tend to die about 25 years younger than the general population. Isak also had this photo in his slides, but I drove around the city a lot to do these interviews with people, and definitely got to know the city better along the way. I also wanted to mention that we talk a lot about theory, and I knew how this sort of infographic, how this works in theory, but to be in the environments that people are living in and to be talking to them about their health and their emotional and social well-being while thinking about these theories in the back of my head was really a different experience for me. I also was really interested in trauma, especially after coming from my yoga teacher training. And these are all of the different things that can come from trauma. And hearing about the stories that people had about trauma that they had experienced and how that impacted them years afterwards was really important. As Asiatu said, this is racism. And I think that Places for People really tries to think about how medicine and social services can be used to address that. Their goal is really to provide the best treatment that they can to people who experience these mental health conditions, along with so many other structural factors. And the goal of my research this summer was to help them understand how the social and emotional forces that people are experiencing are specific to the population that they're working with. And I found that as I was interviewing people that I was thinking a lot about collecting data, and I wanted these conversations to be less about me extracting data from the people who I was talking to and more of like healing conversations within themselves. And now as I think about the yoga teacher training that I went to and how that plays into the work that I was doing at Places for People, I think that both of them were really focused on thinking about how our histories come with us along the way, and how even our society's history is impacting how people are doing in their bodies today.
And as I see graphs of the city like this now, where those big numbers are life expectancies in different areas, I definitely have more personal investment in doing this work and changing how we think about medicine to address those factors. And I've also been thinking a lot about how medicine can play a role in this and how personal agency matters also, because I think that within each of these factors that you see, like diabetes or depression or trauma, there are certain things that people can latch onto to make an impact within just one of those. And while they are all interconnected, the ability to kind of like latch onto one thing and impact all of the rest of how you're experiencing your body is really powerful. I also talked to Claudia a lot this summer and kind of had to learn how to take care of myself as I was hearing a lot of these stories, which I think will be really important for me going into the future as a doctor, hopefully. And this picture for me really symbolizes why I want to go into medicine. This is at Barnes Jewish Hospital recently, and I think that if I can provide direct services while also doing advocacy to change the social structures that are affecting people's health on a day-to-day basis, that's the work that I want to be doing.
Hi, I'm Sarah, and throughout my summer, my project took on a couple different forms, but at its core, the most meaningful and successful part for me was that all of its components ended up facilitating an engagement of learning about the world. This summer, I worked with a kids program in Clarksdale, Mississippi, but to understand my Civic project, it's first important to understand where I was and how I got with the program I worked with. Clarksdale is a rural town in the Mississippi Delta. The map behind me was actually painted by my summer landlord, and you can see that Clarksdale is 2 hours south of Memphis and about 6 hours south of St. Louis. I was in Clarksdale this summer because before coming to WashU, I took a gap year to do an AmeriCorps program there through a program called America Reads Mississippi. I worked as a reading tutor in first grade elementary school at a first grade assistant teacher at a public elementary school, and also volunteered daily at a nonprofit after-school program called Spring Initiative. During my gap year, I worked with Spring Initiative's elementary school cohort. At that time, the students were in kindergarten to third grade. For my Civic project, I worked with the same group of staff and students, now in the 4th through 6th grade. The relationships I maintained throughout the last 4 years was integral to my project development and implementation. Last year, this community asked if my project could help expand their summer health programming. I quickly realized that my limited skill set, coupled with the short length of the summer, greatly restricted how much I was actually able to accomplish this goal. Though my summer developed into both more and less, this was the initial starting point. My project ended up consisting of 3 main components. The first and primary was that I implemented a summer lunch cooking program. The second was I taught weekly science and health lessons, and the third was that I provided daily program support as a summer intern. For cooking, every day I was in charge of planning, buying the ingredients, and preparing the meal with 2 students. This individual time was the highlight of my summer. The students were enthusiastic about everything, from trying the ingredients to learning different cooking techniques to helping me clean the dishes. They taught me that each component of the experience could be an adventure. The best part was the pride that the students took in having made the meal for the entire group. Here are some examples of the dishes that we made. The goal was food exposure. Instead of framing the meals in terms of what one should or shouldn't eat, lunch was more about being excited about trying new foods, whether those were zucchini fritters, spinach quesadillas, or veggie pasta. I know that there are countless structural components regarding food that my project didn't have a chance to address. But on an individual level, each meal we made was completely eaten and enjoyed, and every student got the opportunity to cook. They learned things like how to crack eggs, shred carrots, and the names of different spices and vegetables. Each day, the cohort had the positive experience of sharing a meal together. The second part of my project was teaching lessons. The health lessons are more about expanding the idea of what it means to take care of yourself and others, rather than fulfilling the stereotypical model of biophysical health education. The science lessons were slightly unexpected, but were an extremely fulfilling part to my summer. We made straw windpipes and a lesson about sound, and lemonade and a lesson about solubility. I can't really describe the amount of engagement that the students displayed. They reconnected me with a love of basic science that I had almost misplaced during my time at WashU and showed me the value of limitless curiosity. The last component of my project was basic program support. This included helping with transportation, tutoring, daily planning, and group management, but by far the most fun was getting to go on weekly field trips every Friday. My favorite was a canoe trip on the Mississippi that included an overnight camping experience on a sandbar island. Much like the science experiments, getting to be with the students on these trips helped me learn new things and visit new places with a fresh perspective and increased curiosity. Overall, my project experience was extremely positive. I was privileged to be able to lead and fund activities that the students found enjoyable and were excited about. I learned a lot in terms of lesson planning and cooking, along with the logistics of running a summer kids program. But what I'm happiest about was that I got to spend significant time with incredible kids whom I love. I am thankful that I was able to spend my summer with a group of people in a program that I care about. Civic Scholars allowed me to merge my WashU experience with a community that has taught me so much, and for that I am deeply grateful. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Cole Warner, and this past summer, I lived and worked in my hometown of St. Louis. My project had two main components, each of which were aimed to help further my understanding of healthcare and the way in which I see myself operating within this field as an aspiring doctor. I hope everybody enjoys. The first part of my work was focused with DeSales Community Development, located in the Fox Park neighborhood of the city. Here, I served as a member of a small team, assisting on multiple projects, many of which with a focus on access to affordable healthcare solutions. While initially created with the purpose of addressing affordable housing in the area, it has now expanded to address other issues of community development, such as this building being repurposed to offer up-and-coming small businesses manufacturing space. I was able to learn more about the area's past through a neighborhood history project, which had me looking through old deeds, blueprints, and newspaper clippings, as well as exploring some of the DeSales-owned properties in the Fox Park, Tower Grove East, and Benton Park West neighborhoods. This first project gave me the base to feel like less of an outsider as I learned about the community and where it's come from. I initially grappled with how to show up in a space that, while I do call home, had a different personality than where I was raised. Having the chance to learn about the homes, such as this one shown, and the families nearby gave me the base to feel more connected to the neighborhood and its people. It offered me the chance to understand the local dynamics in a way that was reflective of its true history, as opposed to any stereotypes I might have possessed going into the summer. With this base in hand, I continue to help with the Southside Sports Initiative, specifically a youth baseball league. While I sadly was not able to coach one of the teams, we were able to promote healthy, active lifestyles for children, as well as provide free lunches on game days. This focus on neighborhood health transitioned to the biggest project I helped with this summer, the Health Leads Initiative, a free health services program focused in the neighborhoods that DeSales operates. With the partnership of Casa de Salud, a nearby community clinic, we went door to door, trying to gauge individuals both for interest and also their own ideas for what they would like to see in the program. We coupled this approach with outreach to many of the local businesses in order to help spread awareness and educate folks as to the benefits of this program. I was particularly fond of this approach, as it once again left any assumptions I may have had at the door, and instead focused on the voices of the people who actually stood to benefit. We talked about how to effectively navigate these situations throughout our class, and I'm so thankful to have had this exposure going into the summer. As it relates to my future career aspirations, I hope to meet my patients where they're at, and to help them feel comfortable expressing whatever it is they feel the need to share. Seeing so many people express interest at the end of our long outreach process was incredibly fulfilling. On the more immediate end of the spectrum, working in DeSales Community Garden offered up a great chance for me to help upkeep all the plots and with their garage turned tool shed. This was another great means to get out in the community and hear real people's stories, one of my biggest goals going into this summer. While on the topic of sharing stories, another part of my summer project was training to be a hospice volunteer through BJC Hospice Services. For those of you who aren't aware, hospice work aims to address both the physical and biological sides of disease, as well as the emotional and spiritual needs of the patient. This training allowed me to help meet patients with whatever they might have needed, whether it was chores around the house, running errands, or simply offering my company. Getting to hear people's life stories as they reflect back through the lens of their own impending death was such a gift. I was able to hear so many years of wisdom and experience shape the way in which these patients were viewing their road to come. Many patients were eager and excited to capitalize on any sort of human connection in these waning moments, making it easy to engage and feel as if I was a positive presence in their life. For some of the others who were more distant, I struggled to make these same relationships, leaving me worried I wasn't doing my job. At the end of the day, all my successes and failures of this past summer feel to have left me much more informed on how I hope to show up into my future. When I wasn't working, I studied for the MCAT with one of my best friends, which we then took in August. Never before have I felt as productive and motivated to pursue my future career than I did over the summer, a feeling that has lasted into this school year. To finish off this presentation, I would like to thank my family, including my dog Rudy, the people I worked with this summer, and our Civic cohort for helping support me through all the ups and downs of this past year. I wouldn't be here without all of your love and care, and thank everybody for showing up tonight. Thank you, guys.
And before we conclude this evening's program, I would like another round of applause for all of our Civic scholars. I thank you all for joining us this evening. There's plenty of time to make some connects with some of our Civic scholars before going off into your evening plans. Also know that this was live streamed and we'll have a link available for those that weren't able to be with us this evening. And we'll be sending that on to all of you in the next week or so. So again, thank you so much.